fashion requires constant change. I always say change is the only constant. People buy fashion to express themselves. We develop over 400 fabrics a year. The textile industry in Japan is a very old one. The Japanese are fantastic at innovating. Here, things are very detailed, very precise.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby and sitting in the studio today with Hani. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Toby.
You're the president of Debs Corporation, and this is a family business that your grandfather started when he came to Japan in 1917, over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's a company that now is very diversified, but originally started and still has at the core of its business textiles.
Yes.
So we want to talk a little bit about that and your experience, but maybe can you give us a little bit more information about your background? Where are you originally from?
Sure. It's a good question and might take up a whole podcast, but I'll try to simplify it as much as possible. So first, it's actually my great uncle, which is the brother of my great grandfather that first came to Japan. So the Debs family first came to Japan in 1917. They were what you would call Damascus merchants. So we come from what's currently Lebanon in Beirut, and they literally came across the Silk Road in search of textiles because we've always been in the textiles trade. And after a brief stint in Shanghai in the late 1800s, they decided to come to Japan. And at the time, Japan had just opened up. Kobe was one of the ports. So they took a boat from Shanghai to Kobe. And from then on, they got into the textile business and continued their trade. And we're still here today. That's the reason why I'm here.
It's crazy to have this super long history with Japan and the family coming over and kind of with the original kind of trade routes as they were.
Yeah.
And so now, can you tell us a little bit more about Debs Corporation,
Sure.
the family business that was established? What exactly did they do with textiles?
So I'll probably bring you up to speed with what we do today. So basically, we supply textiles, which is fabric, and especially fabric used for women's wear, clothing, right, apparel. And what we actually do is we forecast trends. We forecast trends at least 2 years ahead. So we are just starting fall, winter 2026.
Really?
So don't ask me what's in trend now because it's something
gone,
we
it's the
did
past.
2 years ago. Yeah. So I'm kind of off trend in a way. But essentially we do trend forecasting. But we have to always see what will become of the end product, what's going to be the design. And then we will kind of work backwards and we start developing fabrics. We see what new yarns there are, what new finishing techniques there are. Do we want it drapey? Do we want it styled? Do we want it stretchy? Do we want it versatile? So we take into all these things. At the same time, we read the market and see what new technologies are available. And we kind of coordinate everything and develop fabrics. So we develop over 400 fabrics a year.
That's more than one per day.
Yeah, it's a lot. But as you know, fashion requires constant change and evolution. You never go to the store and see the same product, right? It's always changing. So we always have to change with the times. So back to what we do, we essentially weave the base fabrics. And then we dye or print the fabrics. And we supply that to the brands of the world. So we work with over 300 brands worldwide, in the North America to Europe, to the Middle East, Australia. And the brands then take care of the rest. So they already know what they want to do with the fabric. So they make the garments. So we just create the fabric.
So the kind of very big rolls of like fabric that are shipped.
Actually a textile roll, and we ship it to a garment factory that they nominate. And then they take care of the rest. I mean, they do their styling and all the accessories and everything. Yeah.
That's super interesting. I'm actually very curious about how you are forecasting trends 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you can give away, but what would be things that are important for you to pay attention to?
It's kind of, how the world kind of miraculously converges sometimes. There's no wrong, but there is a right, so there's always influences depending on the, let's say, world news, right? When you're in a state of economic depression, you would think people will want to wear black or, but it sometimes works the opposite way.
I see.
They want more color, print, because textiles and apparel, people buy fashion to express themselves. And let's say in bad times, you might, maybe women may feel, or any human being could feel insecure. So you want something that's more comfortable, right? More hugging rather than something less, just so like in the 80s when times are good, it was less fabric, more mini skirts,
That's interesting.
It takes the trend of the world.
So and like socio-economical context applied
multiple
to
factors,
textiles.
Yeah.
And so your basically ancestors decided to start a business that will turn into what you're doing today here in Japan. Was there a specific reason? Are the textiles here in Japan different than they were, for example, in China, where they kind of moved over?
Yeah, so the textile industry in Japan is a very old one. So they, as you might imagine, they were mostly in silks for royalty, but even daily wear, a lot of hemp or linen. So it was a very natural-based thing. Textiles by nature, before technology arrived, is based on cottons and natural fibers. But the Japanese always had different uses. Their clothing is different, right? So the kimono and whatnot. So the reason why they ended up in Japan, I'm talking my great uncle and that family, Debs family, is because there was a certain fabric. It was a cotton, but we call it high twist. So it's very cool on the skin and very comfortable to wear. And that was in great demand, and it was coming from the East. But back then, it would trade through many hands. So they don't know the source. And one day, this source, they decided to find out for themselves how to access this fabric. They thought it's from China. But they found out in China, they don't make this kind of high twist cotton. And someone said, maybe you can find it in Japan. And when they came in Japan, they did find it. But what it was is the inner lining of the kimono. So when you wear a kimono, it's very heavy, right? And in summer, humid months in Japan. So it's called juban. It's just a white inner lining undergarment. But it's made in a very high twist because that's what the need was. So Japan always had this different use, but very, here things are very detailed, very precise, and they had this really fine techniques in developing fibers and fabrics. So that's how we ended up here.
That sounds like something that could be coming straight out of a book. Like a few family members gathering around a fire and like, oh, we got this textile. How do they make it? And let's cross the world.
And
here they are.
It's true. The pioneering, if you tell me today to go somewhere, one, it's not that easy in those times. Two, it's a big risk, right? But sure enough, they succeeded with this fabric. And where was it in demand? It was demand in West Africa. So the very big, colorful prints.
Yes.
So the traditional West Africa, the good quality ones, were made on this base fabric because it's very hot there and it's very comfortable. So there's always a need somewhere else from a technology from another place, and it kind of all merged together. Yeah.
And now 100 years later, after finding this kind of high twist fabric, how does the Japanese textile industry still kind of stand out compared to others maybe?
The Japanese are fantastic at innovating. They can always come up with something very creative. And when you look at a piece of fabric, it's hard to see what the fiber is made from. But when you get into these fiber technologies or finishing technologies, there's a very systematic control of manufacturing and innovation as well. So all this coming together, you come up with really functional fabrics. When you wear a garment, it may look the same, but the fabric can make the difference, right?
I mean, we hear Japanese people swearing by heat tech of Uniqlo or Airism in summer that are supposed to keep you warm or keep you cool.
True.
And when you look at them in the store, I don't know.
Yeah.
But Debs Corporation you also developed your own kind of technology.
Yeah. I mean, we don't necessarily brand certain things. Sometimes just touching a fabric and it feels good, or it drapes well. And even better if it cuts well, when you manufacture something with good quality versus something that's not of great quality. It's very hard to, make into a garment. So there's really, it's such a vast, many reasons for it, but I would say innovation and quality and precision is what's necessary. Yeah.
With over 100 years of history, I can imagine there's been a lot of change.
Yes.
You say you forecast trends 2 years in advance, and you constantly have to adapt in an industry that's moving very fast.
Yes.
How do you keep a family business kind of going through all these changes? How do you adapt and kind of reinvent yourself again and again?
Good question. I think being in the fashion industry, because it's so fast, it helps you. I always say change is the only constant. It's the only way you can survive in this fashion industry. If you want to say, okay, this fabric will last forever, it doesn't, right? So you keep having to evolve. So the same goes with the work we do. So we're always thinking out of the box, thinking what's next, thinking what to do. And you have to keep adapting to what the customers need and what the market needs. So it's kind of it's not a scientific process, but I think we've adapted a lot compared to the 100 years ago where we started in trading. We are now more in manufacturing. One, because there's less people in the industry. Just side note, the Japanese industry from its peak in textiles is maybe 1/10 of the size, if not less today.
That's a big decrease.
It's a big decrease. So that means you have less partners to depend on, which means you have to do more yourself. So you kind of go in, I would say vertically. We now own our own printing machines. We don't want to get into full-scale manufacturing, but we have to do things that we don't want to lose because people are leaving the industry. So you end up becoming a very...
so building your own ecosystem in a way.
You have to build your own ecosystem.
Because if one part goes missing and nobody can do it anymore, your whole business crumbles too.
Yes. And this industry is kind of interesting because no one company produces everything. So you really have to have really good relationships. I would say that's almost number one, and good partnerships. But if your partner falls apart or goes away, you have to be ready for that. So it's always this dynamic shift of people, and the more smaller it gets, the more important that becomes. And that's what we've been doing.
And one big part of it is once you have all those textiles that you produce in Japan is also getting them around the world. You said you have clients in North America, in Asia, originally West Africa, and then now also Australia.
That's right.
How do you manage all these exporting procedures from Japan? Is it
well, I would say exporting is
the easy part.
The easy part. I think people can do the trade. I think manufacturing the fabrics, the demands of the customers, more and more now demand of regulation with sustainability. For example, EU regulations coming into place. You're forbidden to use this and this and this. So all these, you have to be always updated. So I think that's the harder part.
Yeah, especially fast fashion has been under a lot of scrutiny, right? Because I mean, as far as I know, to produce textiles, it requires a lot of water as well to kind of process and produce, and that's kind of become a point of discussion.
Yes.
Is it the same in Japan with regulations as well regarding textile production and import-export?
Yeah, this also becomes a whole rabbit hole in itself. You know, what's sustainable, right?
What's sustainable?
So if you tell me a recycled polyester garment is sustainable, at one end, yes, because you're recycling, PET bottles. But if you're producing millions of garments in it and only 20% sells, and you throw away the rest, that's also waste, right? So when you look at the whole issues of sustainability, which is a big topic in the industry, it's you have to look at it from very different angles.
It makes it quite complex as well then for you to decide, okay, how do we position our company? Because there's a public perception of what is sustainable, or this company is doing something sustainable. We may want to work with them, and this company is not. Yeah. But the way it's looked at may be very different, as you just pointed out.
True. This is like a kind of side, note of some information. The introduction of fast fashion, and I'm not against or for fast fashion, but what I'm against or for would be maybe producing too much without the knowledge of what could be sold. And there's data points that show that 80% of brand's sales comes from 20% of its product. So in other words, you're producing 80% things that don't sell,
which become waste.
So, and at the same time, your prices are gone down, in the last 10 years. In Japan itself, 40 to 50%. So you see this strange dynamic of buying cheap, but producing more things that don't sell, right? So it's a challenge in the industry.
Would you say, maybe as a kind of hot take, that generally speaking, in the industry that kind of accelerated faster and faster over the last decade with the introduction of fast fashion, and it used to be, trend for a year. It used to be a trend for 2 years, and you used to plan for seasons. Now you plan for weeks. A lot of companies, they produce something every week. You see new garments coming out. Would it be perhaps now time to just slow down everything and go back to how it was maybe before?
I can only tell you my thinking. And I'm sure everyone has different opinions on this. But I don't believe that this argument is about slow fashion versus fast fashion. Fast fashion succeeds for a reason. It's because, it's the Amazon effect, right? It's satisfaction. You see what's in trend, you see the color in trend, and you can buy it today. You don't want to wait so long to buy a shirt, right? So you also have to maintain that speed, but you also have to focus on better quality. And how can you do on-demand production? Because textiles there's a long lead time involved in the whole process, actually, from yarn to a garment, right? How can you shorten it, but without sacrificing quality and really focusing on what's something good, And I think by doing this, you can minimize the waste, and you can also reproduce. You don't need to hold so much inventory. You just rebuy what you feel is good if you can get it to market faster. So there's it's like a double dynamic, Yeah.
And you mentioned on-demand production, which is actually something that was kind of initially introduced by Toyota, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
With the car manufacturers.
True.
Is this something that you think is realistic also, maybe?
It's
fashion industry
getting more and more realistic. But there's always you always have to sacrifice something to make that happen. So but you like you said, you have to position yourself. So we have this new printing factory in Kyoto, which does on-demand printing.
Cool.
Yeah. So the goal is what usually takes let's say 30 to 45 days to produce a custom print, we can do in a day to 6 days. Okay. But that changes the dynamic of the customer, because then the customer can make samples, put it online, they see what they sell, and then they can produce inventory and garments based on what they can forecast better. So you're minimizing the total waste, right? And I think, and on top of that, it's a waterless system. So you're adding the waterless together with the reduction of inventory. So it's a win-win, right, for everyone.
This goes back to Japanese innovation in kind of the industry of textiles and finding new ways to kind of improve systems.
Yeah.
One of the things that plays a lot of weight on quality is where the garment is made.
Yeah.
And there are some maybe negative images of made in certain countries. But made in Japan really became a sort of like a stamp of approval. If it's made in Japan, it's high quality.
Yeah.
Is this something that's still true today? As you mentioned, the industry really shrunk and kind of...
There's always that touch. Japan does things differently. I always find if you show me two fabrics, you would know which one is made in Japan. But I'm more of the belief, one of our kind of philosophies is made with Japan. So we don't think that everything should be made completely in Japan. Some places do things better, right? But Japan does certain things better. So let's say back to textiles, fibers, yarns, certain performance attributed fabrics, or finishing techniques. Japan is a leader. But can we use these yarns and produce it somewhere else, outside? So it's Japan in the back end, but maybe produced somewhere else.
Interesting.
Yeah. So or you have to collaborate with your customers. The unfortunate thing about garments is labels only require to show where the garment is made. So you might say made in somewhere, but the fabric could be from Japan, but you wouldn't know that.
And there's no way to know as a customer.
There's no way to know. So we have, we kind of propose this to a few customers, and a few customers do this on their own, but they actually, on their websites or even on their labels, they write manufactured here, but fabrics from Japan. So it gives the consumer that impression, and you're actually showing transparency and showing that you're using a good quality fabric. So it does have value. Yeah.
I like the idea of like made with Japan.
Yeah.
It's kind of maybe the next step forward in a way, because producing everything in one place is difficult, and I can imagine also quite costly.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in a global world. Everyone has its strengths and weaknesses. If we can combine that, it's best. And especially for Debs, our value comes in knowing the Japanese textile industry. And if we're going to do something that doesn't involve Japan, it doesn't really have value to us. And so we try to integrate, whether it's chemical, whether it's yarn, whether it's dye stuff. How can we make this a global thing that involves Japan? Yeah.
You told me when we were exchanging before you came that you work with a lot of startups that work on kind of maybe creating innovative fabrics or like technologies that you can integrate.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, so this is kind of a new thing. So we started this innovation hub, if you want, so within the company. There's a lot of companies that are producing new types of fibers. For example, I don't know if you know washi.
Yes.
Yeah.
The paper.
So washi is paper. So there's paper fibers now made of washi. But as you can imagine, paper is weak, right? But there's fibers that are as strong as normal fibers that are made from paper. So it's very sustainable, but it's very new also. And we try to integrate that and develop products and promote that to the world. So that's a Japanese innovation in fiber, and we're trying to develop the fabric and, supply the brands of the world with it.
It's interesting because you kind of go back for innovation into like a very ancient technique of producing paper.
Yeah, it's true.
Is this a cycle that you see repeating itself?
Yeah, I mean, there's different angles to it, but there's always hints in the past that have been lost or that should be revived. So a lot of textile is such an old industry. So there's success points of the past that you can find, but you have also new technologies that enable that to happen. So I think combining the latest technologies with old techniques or materials is something that's you could come up with something new and innovative. Yeah.
It's difficult to sometimes maybe keep the balance between this heritage and innovation. I feel a lot of times when people come to Japan for the first time, they have this phrases, Japan is like an in-between tradition and modernity.
New and old, yeah.
And maybe to some extent this is true. But you yourself have a very kind of long-standing family business, and you have traditions from the old way they twisted the cotton that was what started it, and now developing technologies like air dye, which is your proprietary kind of fabric that you're making. How do you keep this balance? Is this is there a balance?
I always ask the question, what's tradition, right? There's certain traditions you like to see gone, right? That you feel unnecessary in the world.
Outdated.
Yeah, outdated. But I look at tradition not in the sense of preservation of certain maybe product, but rather than tradition is more like the reason of your existence, like your reputation, right? Trust. I think these are important values that you should always keep in your DNA from a traditional, or even though everyone's going cheaper, to keep that. Don't sacrifice quality over price, and these are kind of subliminal traditional things. A machine is a machine, and in fact the older machines make better fabric, so but you can't also depend on old machines because you will never succeed in today's textile industry. So you always have to have this fine balance of innovation, but I see tradition more in the sense of values, while you do new things with that value set.
Interesting.
So it's a very different, I'm not so much in this mode of preserving things just for the sake of preserving and doing new things on the side. I think it needs
to come
together. Yeah.
One of the ways you were saying that you kind of, together with your family, grew the business was by starting subsidiaries, starting to find ways to do everything in-house, so to say, so that you don't depend too much on others. What was a kind of, how did you approach this from a business perspective to kind of grow the company? I can imagine this is not something that happens overnight.
No, doesn't happen. It's kind of a natural process. Just to clarify, we try to stay out of manufacturing, and our focus is on what we call fabric converting. So we design, develop, but outsource to weavers, outsource to dyers. So we prefer not to own factories, but you need to have your ecosystem, which is partner factories. So they're not just someone you call once in a while. You commit to them it's a long-term relationships on their capacities, on fulfilling their machine needs. So I think you kind of have to have this really good relationship. Relationships is everything in this, even on the customer side, but just back to the production side, having these key partners and having communication, deep communication is essential to our business. And it just gets deeper and deeper because your partners get less and less. So you really want to make sure
that they keep going
with
too.
The right, yes.
Interdependence in a way.
And the biggest test of that was COVID.
How did that affect the business?
Well, how How much clothes did you buy in COVID, right?
I think in Japan we were
In
somehow
a different perspective, yeah.
maybe more free to still go out and buy
Yes.
things, but I know
Yeah.
that a lot of people, stuck at home. But maybe online sales took
Yeah.
off.
So I would say online sales seem very big, but there's still a very small fraction of actual apparel sales. And when your store is worldwide, when your customers have no outlet for their product, they have to stop buying, right? And they stop buying fabric, right? So you're put in a situation where you have to keep machines running, or else your partners die, right? The production ecosystem collapses. But you also don't have an outlet because your customers are essentially closed for business. They have to survive, and they find digital outlets, and everyone finds a way to survive. But still, your sales of some companies went down 70%. And when you go down 70%, it's usually, it won't last too long, right? So one of the strategies then, and it takes a lot of guts, is say, let's keep all our partners at a bare minimum without knowing that you're going to sell the product. Let's keep weaving. We kept going. One day it should open up, right? We don't know the end.
You don't know when, but one day.
One day. So with that kind of positive hope, you may call it a foolish risk, but I think the more foolish risk is to stop producing with your partners that you've lived, has helped you all this time. So we have this symbiotic relationship, and that proved our success when things started opening up.
So the bet paid off.
The bet paid off.
The trust paid off too.
Bet paid off. Just back to the COVID situation, the other strategy is to always remain global. So when Europe was closed, the US was open. When the US was closed, Australia was open. So there were always markets open, but there are companies that only do the US or only do Europe, in whatever industry, actually. So you always have to have a global presence, because that also helps in times of need, right? Yeah. You never know what happens in this world, especially today.
In your time as a president of the company, what would you say was one of the maybe more rewarding moments where you're like, this is something we did with the company, we achieved this?
I think challenges are always rewarding, right?
When you overcome
when
them.
you overcome them. But I think the story I told you of keeping our support of our production partners, keeping engagement with the customers. We're not in an industry that is telework friendly. You have to touch fabric. You have to look at it.
You have to produce
physically. You have to produce it. You can't do it online or from your home. If you work from home, it's just to follow up on an email. Maybe there was backlash, but I would say the staff, the employees, our partners, all kind of the people that said, you know what, let's try to come into the office or to production floors as much as we can, despite all the restrictions. And by doing that, we were able to come out very successfully. And when I say very successfully, our sales have doubled since pre-COVID.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so it's not a V-shaped curve, it's an up curve. And I think that is because we took that foolish risk, if you want, or the risk of supporting our partners. And we also kept the relationships going with the customers, and we kept things going within our company. So I think when you come out of, it's the most challenging thing. I've ever experienced. But I think when you come out of it, it's extremely rewarding. Yeah.
In a situation like this, as a leader of your company, you had to bring everyone together, the customers, the partners, and all your employees to be like, I know it's scary. I know there's a dangerous virus going around. I know you're worried for your job, for your income, for everything. How do you bring everyone together in that moment to go through this?
It's not easy. I would never say it's easy. When I look in hindsight, I also don't know how I did it. It's kind of the adrenaline that goes through that makes you do things beyond what you think you can do. But I think one of our core values is to be very, we treat everyone like family. So I think with that feeling, I'm talking partners, customers, employees, staff, we all consider them as partners. So it's always that before money. And I think that kind of culture helped us pull through.
In challenging times, the family comes together.
In challenging times, family comes together. Yeah. Actually, if you look at it on the flip side, you also know who is not. You know, who you thought was a strong partner was not. You know, so it kind of filters out the best of people and the worst of people. So
and the core value keeps together the ones that need to.
Together. Yeah. Yeah.
You also manage a very global company, right? You have partners all over the world, and among your employees, I imagine you also have maybe people from different nationalities.
Yes.
How do you manage this kind of international workplace in terms of communication and the cultural differences?
You mean within the
company?
Well, to start, you know, if I tell you I'm Japanese, you wouldn't believe me, right? So to start, I'm the management of the company is not Japanese or Japanese looking, but we have Japanese values because I was born and raised here. So I think part of this international mindset has always been there. And of course, when you hire people or the people that want to work for a company, within Japan, it's not your typical, I don't like that word, but it's not your standard Japanese. There are people that have an international mindset or just like communicating. I always joke where we have such strong personalities and characters in the company because each person is so unique. But that's the environment that makes us who we are and that makes us succeed. So I think just it's not about Japanese or not Japanese, just having that common multicultural mindset is part of our DNA.
So in terms of language too, you utilize both at work.
Yeah,
English,
we
Japanese.
try to always make English as our company. It's not the forced type, but English is the standard communication, and we don't need to translate things anymore. But I think everyone should have an international mindset if they want to do work at Debs, because 97% of our customers are overseas. So we always have to be international.
Yeah. You have to talk with clients and like.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm curious about you personally and kind of taking over a family business. How is it like? Is there like a kind of, in movies sometimes we see that the father will kind of groom the son from young on and teach the values of the companies, teach the business, the trade.
Yes.
What was it like for you to kind of step into this role?
Yeah. You're kind of born into it. It's not in full transparency. It wasn't the career choice of my real passions, right? But since the age of 12 or 13, you see fabrics at home. That's conversation at the dinner table. You have customers coming over, and then before you know it, you're helping your father in the office, cutting samples, doing all this labor work. And before you know it, I think I was working in a warehouse at age 16. Before you know it, you're like fully trained before you even go to college. So
you don't even finish school and you know everything about textile.
You just kind of like it becomes part of your identity, right? And I actually went to UPenn.
In the U.S., University of Pennsylvania.
Studied at the Wharton School, which is known for finance. This is 92 to 96. Those days, everyone was going into finance, right? Wall Street. I think I was one of the few people that went into manufacturing. I graduated May 1996. I started working June 1996, so straight from graduation to work, right?
Back into the family business.
That's it, yeah.
But I imagine you kind of have your own approach, right? Everyone in your family has the core values of Debs Corporation, but then maybe you have your own approach to running the business because times change too.
Definitely. So I always, I think creativity and design is what makes something last longer. Always good things survive the times. The rest go up and down, up and down. So I think the real focus on design and creativity, innovation. This if you lose innovation, you lose everything. But you need that design aesthetic element to go with it. So I think my value is more in this field of creativity, of creating new partnerships based on this value. Yeah.
So maybe less focused just on the trade, but more like, okay, how can we make something new? How can we be the first one to make the next step in the industry?
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you have to preserve your legacy business if you want, but actually your innovation feeds into the legacy business. If you just focus on the legacy business and forget this part, you become a sinking ship. So I think my values are kind of in this field. Yeah.
Before we started recording, you were mentioning that under Debs Corporation, you were also kind of getting into new industries, kind of venturing a little bit beyond textiles. Is this kind of what you were just mentioning about innovating in something new and kind of applying this to the legacy business?
Yeah, I mean, I was joking and half joking, actually, saying, once you can do textiles, you can almost do anything else because it's so demanding and it covers from art to science to biology to chemistry to logistics and so on and so forth. So, but in order to preserve, one thing COVID teaches you is that when you're in one industry, some people the survival risk is also high. So you need to kind of hedge your business in a way that the goal is to preserve your legacy business, which is our textiles business. But we can do that by starting new divisions that kind of support the textile business, if you know what I mean. So we kind of renewed our vision. Our slogan is textile and lifestyle solutions. Okay, so textile and lifestyle. So within the lifestyle, we do wellness. So I think wellness is a big word. We have our own skincare line now, but also wellness fabrics. So let's say you can create fabrics that have natural moisturizing properties.
Really?
Yeah, or collagen based fabrics that can help your skin perform. So it's a field in its own that's a bit different from what we do day to day, but it's a new thing that I see is more and more important in the future. We also have our digital business where we create systems and whatnot, but no one really does a lot of systems for the textiles industry. So we have new websites where you could put together prints and map them out on garment styles, and it feeds into our production. So we
Interesting.
kind of integrate these new kind of incubations into our businesses.
So you kind of have your own kind of startup ecosystem
Yeah, it's like
inside
incubation units within the textiles.
So how do you find like new graduates in Japan that are kind of eager to start things, and you work with young entrepreneurs to bring them in to kind of?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Japan has huge R&Ds. It's not, we don't have the labs and everything ourselves, but there's people that do. And usually the people that create these kind of innovative fibers nowadays are not from the industry. So they create a great product, but they have no idea how to make it a piece of fabric.
Interesting.
So that's where we collaborate. So it's all about, and we would never brand it that it's our own. So it's Debs collaboration with X and X. So it's the future for me is about collaborations, transparency, helping each other, innovating, and that's it. Yeah.
When you have maybe young people that are interested in the textile, fashion, apparel industry talk to you, do you often see maybe some misconceptions about what the industry is really like, and people think, oh, we're just gonna maybe design clothes quickly or just print out this and people kind of misunderstanding that there's a whole lot more beyond.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not. First of all, you brought a good point. Most young people would never want to go into the textile industry, or maybe they think that each brand makes their fabrics on their own, so the brand is cool, thus textiles and everything is cool. It's actually not like that at all, but at the same time you also have to think how to attract young talent into the field, and I think these new spaces of innovation are very interesting for the generation today. I think there's a move back into manufacturing or making things, right? But I think there's no, when I also host interviews of new people, there's a difference between liking fashion as in wanting to shop versus trying to make something fashion. So shopping is easy.
You just take out the credit card and
exactly. Making something, anything actually, is not so straightforward, right? So you have to be kind of ready for the challenge, and there's a lot you can't teach. So it's like what did they say? Letting a baby swim on its own, right?
You have to take them in and kind of just show them, okay, this is it.
This
you
is
have
it.
to learn, and improve
do.
and fail.
Yeah. But you also need that positive environment. And what do they call it in Japan? 3K?
3K. I don't think I've heard this before.
Kitanai, kibishi. It's very negative, right?
Okay.
The whole,
Strict.
Manufacturing is, you have to work so much, and it's not in the cleanest of environments. It's tough, right? But you don't need to be that way. You could have nice offices. You could have nice working environment that's provides room for innovation and challenging people with new ideas. You could put your dreams into reality, right? So it's also our job, and I think to create this environment and change the perception of the industry. I always prefer to be the leader rather than the follower. We have to do that.
With this industry that shrunk so much, are other companies in Japan also trying to keep up with this innovation, or do you feel like they're sometimes stuck in their old ways that gives this industry this reputation?
I think it falls into two groups. There is the more traditional way of thinking, but there's a lot of companies that are innovating, I think, or changing the ways and making it more attractive. And I think that's good for the industry. Whether it's a competitor or not, doesn't matter. The more the merrier in a sense. So I think it just splits into two.
If now I want to actually get a feel for Debs Textiles,
okay.
Where can I go, and what should I look out for?
We're usually not allowed to name brands publicly, but you can
We
How
can try
you
to do a
that?
riddle.
You can come
this.
to our office. Okay. It's in Osaka. We can show you what brands we work with. We work in fashion, we work in intimates, and we work in sports apparel. Best is to come over to our office. But just
in
to
Osaka.
give you some names.
That's quite interesting. And I think there's also this ongoing debate always about what is good fabric, what is bad fabric. And sometimes, even if you're not paying attention too much, some companies use fabrics that are obviously bad or poorly cut. You were mentioning earlier in our conversation, some fabrics are not easy to cut. And then you see it's kind of a bit rough.
Yeah.
But there's never this, this criticism for, this brand is not using good fabrics or not, and what is good fabric or not. Is there an easy way to tell when you go shopping, like, this fabric is of decent quality or not? Or is this just learned with a trade of constantly touching and feeling fabric?
I think try to use it more than 10 times, and I think you'll see the difference.
Okay. Rule of thumb.
Yeah, rule of thumb. Good fabrics, they survive the test of times. Some even get better.
Yeah, they age well.
Yeah, they age well. Yeah.
Like a good denim or...
Yeah. Actually, the worst part of when you have a good fabric and bad manufacturing, meaning garment manufacturing, that's like the worst type of scenario because people tend to blame the fabric. So
you take the blame for someone else's poor performance.
So kind of what's unique about our industry, how I see it is that, let's say you have an iPhone, right? Apple makes the iPhone. And I'm sure there's tons of components inside. You don't know who makes those components, right? But as long as this thing works, it's to Apple's credit. The garment industry or the apparel industry is a little unique because what the fabric is I would say, as important as the style, right? So there's this, it's out there.
Yeah.
It's not hidden.
You feel it, you wear it.
You feel it, you wear it, it's on you. So you can't hide it. So the balance between a brand and the textile manufacturer is in a way very unique and symbiotic because we need the brand obviously for business, and the brand also, you can't produce garments without fabric, right? So it's a very symbiotic relationship. Yeah.
Looking back at your time at the presidency and now looking forward, you said your focus is creativity, innovation. Is there something we can expect coming out of Debs Corporation soon in the next year or so that you have in the works?
Yeah, we are something we're slowly kind of teasing in the market now. There's a very interesting producer of, they're actually a bio venture company, nothing to do with textiles, but they've succeeded in producing fiber made from eggs that you eat.
Okay.
Yeah. So that sounds like really strange and weird, but when you think of an egg, so they've researched eggs for 20 plus years, and they found out, that membrane, that thin, when you boil an egg.
And you want to peel it off because it's...
So they thought, well, this egg gives life, right? And it could be in really harsh conditions. There must be something unique to this property, and they found out that the membrane is a fiber. So and it has moisturizing properties by nature, and it has UV cut SPF by nature, and it also has a pH control. pH control first. So by nature, this fiber can moisturize you, protect you from the sun, and keep a good balance of pH without any chemicals or anything. So they made a fiber from it. So now we're developing our fiber range, for intimates or innerwear. It's just these kind of innovations. It's just a teaser of something.
That's a lot of researching eggs for 20 years. That's a lot of
that's
dedication.
not us, that's them. But
is this in Japan as well?
Yes, in Japan. Yes.
So again, Japan is there with innovation and with kind of commitment to researching eggs for 20 years and finding the one thing that might revolutionize the textile industry.
Yeah. And it's actually a sustainable material because you would think who has so much eggs, but let's say mayonnaise companies, or you use a lot of eggs in the industry. They usually throw this away. So it's a kind of a recycling effort too. So it's a sustainable and wellness and innovative material. So it kind of merges all these things together.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And so this is coming soon?
Yeah, hopefully by June, we'll have a series of fabrics that people can try.
Maybe in your offices in June and see some egg skin-based textile.
Yeah. No smell, don't worry.
No smell.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of things today so far, from like your company's origin, how you went through difficult times, the textile industry in Japan and more.
Yeah.
Is there something that you feel like you'd like to share that we haven't talked about, something that's important to know maybe about the business in Japan or the industry in general?
Yeah. No, but I kind of like interesting facts. So maybe I'll start questioning you.
Me, all right.
So how many companies do you think exist in Japan that are over 100 years old?
I read that the longest serving company is from Japan. It's a hotel, Ryokan, that is like very long.
A couple centuries
so
old. Yeah.
Over 100, that's a tough one. I'm going to say maybe 1,600 something.
Yeah, so it's actually 33,000.
33,000 companies in Japan are over 100 years old.
So we're still in that 33,000. But the next question comes to how many companies, new companies, get to survive 100 years? Like, what's the percentage?
0.001.
Yeah, so it's actually zero. That's 0.03.
Close.
Yeah, so obviously over 99% of companies don't survive. And how many of those companies are foreign owned in Japan?
One.
I don't know. So we're in a very unique position. I think the point is we're a unique company. I can't claim that we're the only. I'm sure there may be others that you might discover. But I think this something works, right? And I think we started the conversation about our origins. So we're from kind of Lebanon, or Damascus, which is the merchant mentality. So we are good at maybe the trade and relationships with customers. And then, but we're been here in Japan, right? So Japan brings this innovation, right? Thinking next, creation. And then, as a lot of my family is also educated in the West, right? Especially in the US. And, when you talk about branding or marketing and this, this triangle is kind of what makes our company successful. It's the innovation, the mercantile tradition of basic trade and relationships, and the innovation aspect.
The three ingredients for success.
The cultural mix works. Yeah.
For long-standing companies.
Yes.
Would you say that maybe now, one of the facts was that very few companies actually make it so long. And here at Zen Group, the company is about to turn 10 in a few weeks from our recording.
Milestone.
Yeah, it's a big milestone. Congratulations to our CEOs for getting this started.
Yes.
When starting a company, if you have young entrepreneurs listening to us today, would you say, or would you advise them to get in there with a mindset of building something that lasts? Or would you say just build something and see what happens?
You're talking about entrepreneurs in Japan?
Yes, specifically in Japan, maybe.
Japanese entrepreneurs?
Not necessarily foreign entrepreneurs.
Foreign entrepreneurs. I mean, my advice is, don't try to do things on your own. it's good to collaborate, learn from experience. I think it's very hard to start up a company in Japan. I would imagine, especially as a foreigner, because I go back to tradition, but it's that trust element. And Japan, in a good way, but sometimes it works in a negative way. That trust is very important. So when they see a startup and it's not owned by someone from Japan, that kind of trust in, let's say, financial, you need investment, right? It's very hard to get. So if you can collaborate with long-standing companies, it's always a good incubation to grow your business. So my advice is always, don't try to go at it alone. Try to find this nice place where you can, grow. Investors are always maybe looking at startups, and I'm sure there's so much good ideas, and Japan needs that ideas coming also from the outside. But just make sure you're in the right place.
Yeah, the key to get the ideas to grow is
you need a
trust.
nest.
You need a nest.
You need that nest. So don't try to build that nest all on your own. This is what I'm trying to say.
I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
A lot of people are trying and struggling in Japan. Regulations are difficult. Language barrier might be a challenge, but that trust too, with suppliers, with partners, with investors.
Always the bottom line. Yeah.
Maybe my last question: how do you get that trust? How do you get those partners to be like, oh yeah, this young person, or maybe not so young, wants to try something new. I'm gonna give him my trust and see what happens. How do you bridge this gap?
I think my father always taught me something which I always remember and value to this day, which is it's all about respect. So a lot of people make this mistake saying the values they know are the right way of doing things. And especially in a country where things look like they're 180 degrees different. But when you're different, doesn't mean you're wrong. And so when you go in the mindset of saying, oh, wow, that's another way of looking at things, and this also works. This is also amazing. Once you can break that barrier, I'm saying, try to understand that neither of you are wrong or right. It's not about that. It's you have to respect the culture, and you have to understand how others see that. And I don't think that's only related to Japan. It's just more obvious in Japan because some things are done so differently, right? So that's always my advice.
Words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hani, for sharing your
old.
story. Wisdom doesn't have to be old.
Thank you.
This was very interesting for me. A lot of insights. I have a lot more questions, but I think we'll
sure.
save them maybe for another time.
I'm sure, yeah.
Thank you for sharing all
Thank
your
you so
insights. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll see you again next week. Bye. Thank you.